for 1 or 2 more minutes for more people to join in. Okay. In the meantime, how was your exam today? How was the test today? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Fine? It was fine? You could answer? Easy. Okay. Good. Easy tha. Okay. ठीक है. We will ask Dr. Bim to conduct a more tougher examination for you from now onwards. What say? Okay. So, one of you, please tell me what all have you read till now? Easy, medium. Okay. So it was not very tough. Good. So in megaloblastic anemia, what all have you read? You've read about the megaloblastic anemia, the hemolysis part also you have read. Anyone? Does anyone know what is ineffective erythropoiesis? Has it? You know what is ineffective erythropoiesis? Okay. Okay. Good. Due to destruction of erythroid precursors seen in megaloblastic anemia. Very good. But okay. Okay, you have a basic concept of what is ineffective erythropoiesis. I think I'll wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll start. Okay. So how are you people liking hematology? Are you finding it easy, tough? First 2 lectures of hematology. I think they were the similar ones which you had already read in physiology. Interesting. Good, Kartikeya. Acha, Vivek, the sequence is little different from that of Robbins. Definitely the sequence would be different, but the topics and the learning objectives which we are giving you is what we will be following. Okay, so you can take and pick and choose whatever topics which we are teaching from Robbins. You can take from, you can read that from Robbins. Some concepts are new. Definitely some concepts would be new. You are going to read, you come to a new class, you've come to a new professional year. So you are going to have some concepts which are new. Some concepts might be difficult. All of you would not be able to grasp them as quickly as I'm teaching or others. Okay. So if you are having any issues reading or understanding the concepts, you can always come back and ask. Okay, so I'll be having 3 lectures back to back. The first lecture, if you're having any issue, okay, I'll share my email ID in the end of the, in the last slide, I'll share my email ID. Okay, so if you're having any issues, you can always ask in the beginning of the next lecture. Okay, so this we can do for the next 3 lectures, we can do this, that whatever I am teaching in the first lecture, that you can read, and if you don't understand, if there is any doubt, any issues in whatever you're seeing in the books and whatever I am teaching, you can always come back and ask me. Okay, I think we have enough students, and let us start without wasting much time. Okay. Okay. So today we will be discussing about a category of disorders which are called hemolytic anemias. So anemia, you understand, anemia is a terminology where we have reduced hemoglobin. Okay, so that is anemia. Hemolytic means, hemo means blood, lysis, lytic comes from lysis or lytic, that is destruction. So there is destruction of blood cells in this, which is causing anemia. So this is what is hemolytic anemia. In this lecture, we have learning objectives of to define and classify hemolytic anemias, to describe the pathogenesis, clinical features, and hematological indices in hemolytic anemias, to describe the different blood pictures in different hemolytic anemia. So this part, different blood pictures and different hemolytic anemias, this we will be discussing as and when we proceed for different hemolytic anemias. Otherwise, we will be talking about these first two generic points. This we will be discussing in detail today, and we'll be taking on a few hemolytic anemias also. And I would also request all of you to not write your names and roll numbers in your this thing in the chat box, because your attendance is already calculated from the site anyway. Okay. So let's start with hemolytic anemias. So what are they? They are basically a group of disorder which leads to anemia because of reduction in RBC lifespan. So how does this reduction occurs? Because the RBCs are getting destroyed. Okay. So that is the reason which leads to reduction in the RBC lifespan. Normally the lifespan is 60 to 120 days. We all have read that it is 120 days. It is 60 to 120 days, but in hemolytic anemias, there is destruction, so the lifespan is less than 15 days also at times. This I'm talking about the most severe ones. So the lifespan would be can be less than 15 days also. Okay. So although the normal bone marrow has the capacity to increase its RBC production, which is erythropoiesis, by 6 to 8 times the normal. Okay, so normally what happens if there are RBCs which are getting destroyed in the blood? So what will the bone marrow do? It will try to produce more RBCs. So it will increase, it will amp up the erythropoiesis. Now this increase can be up to 6 to 8 times normally also, but hemolytic anemias, the premature destruction of RBCs, it supersedes the erythropoietic capacity of bone marrow. So you have the balance which is tipping towards the destruction more rather than formation. The RBC production cannot compensate the destruction. So eventually you have anemia. Okay. So this hemolytic anemia is characterized by accelerated destruction of red cells and compensatory bone marrow regeneration. Okay. We're clear about that. There are two important things which are going to lay foundation of whatever is going to happen in any hemolytic anemia. There will be increased destruction. There will be compensatory bone marrow regeneration. Okay. So what are the common features? So RBC lifespan is shortened. Normal is 120 days, so it will be less than 120 days. Secondly, there will be increased erythropoietin levels. So erythropoietin, we know, it is a hormone. It is implicated to increase the erythropoiesis, that is RBC formation. So because the RBC are getting destroyed in the periphery, the body sends a signal to the bone marrow with the help of increased erythropoietin levels. And this erythropoietin, it leads to compensatory increase in the erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis, I hope you all understand, is RBC formation in the bone marrow is called erythropoiesis. Okay. Now, this is one thing which is happening. Now, because of RBC destruction, because when the RBC destroys, there is hemoglobin which is formed, and this hemoglobin degradation products which will accumulate and they will cause some symptoms. Okay, so these are the three common things which will happen in any hemolytic anemias. Depending on the type of hemolytic anemia, the severity can be low or high. The degree of degradation products or erythropoiesis, they can be increased or decreased, but these are the common features which will occur in all. Okay, now how do we classify hemolytic anemias? We can either classify them on the basis of inheritance, they can be hereditary or acquired. We can classify them on the basis of the location of the defect, that is, where is the problem? It could be intracorpuscular defect, that is, the defect is corpuscule, हम किसको कहते हैं? We call it the red cell को red blood corpuscle कहते हैं ना, तो intracorpuscular is inside the red blood cell. If there is a defect, that is intrinsic to the RBC, there is a defect that is called intracorpuscular defect, or it could be extracorpuscular defect, that is the defect is outside. If there is something from outside which is coming and eating the RBC. Okay. So that is on the basis of this we can classify the hemolytic anemias. And third, on the basis of the site of hemolysis, that is, the RBCs are getting destroyed. They can get destroyed inside the blood vessel, that is intravascular, or they can be destroyed outside the blood vessel, which usually occurs in spleen, that is called extravascular hemolysis. Okay, so we have intravascular or we have intravascular or extravascular hemolysis. All these things are important. So we have formulated a classification scheme which is encompassing a lot of these things. Okay, so here we have intracorpuscular defects and extracorpuscular defects. The intracorpuscular defects can further subdivided be into hereditary and acquired. Majority of intracorpuscular are hereditary. They could be RBC membrane defects. They could be RBC enzyme deficiencies. They could be disorders of the globin chain synthesis. So that is a protein defect. Okay. So these are the hereditary causes. Then acquired means there is only one cause, which is a membrane defect, which is an acquired intracorpuscular defect. Okay. The example is PNH, that is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. We will be discussing about this today. Then next is extracorpuscular defect. Extracorpuscular defect are usually acquired. Okay, there is only one rare extracorpuscular defect which is hereditary, otherwise they're all acquired. Okay, so they could be antibody mediated, so that there is some antibody which is coming and which is destroying the RBC. There could be mechanical trauma which is destroying the RBCs. There could be infections, there could be drugs and chemicals, there could be thermal injury, for example in burns, and sequestration. Sequestration is kind of like hoarding and accumulating the RBCs. So this occurs when the spleen is too big, it will all hoard and accumulate the RBCs and eventually cause the destruction of RBCs. That is called sequestration. So, okay, so we have intracorpuscular and extracorpuscular defects. Intracorpuscular can be hereditary, majority are hereditary. They can be acquired also. Acquired means there is only one cause, that is PNH. And in hereditary, you have membrane defects, enzyme, globin chain synthesis. And extracorpuscular are mainly acquired defects. Okay. Sequestration. Okay. Sequestration told. Okay. Now I'm talking about, here I have told only about the categories. Now I'll be talking about the separate entities in each category. Okay. So the RBC membrane abnormalities, in which the most common is hereditary spherocytosis. You can have hereditary elliptocytosis, hereditary stomatocytosis, which are also there. They're basically membrane abnormalities due to which there is abnormality in the shape. Okay. Then second is abnormalities of RBC enzyme. The most common one, I hope you would all have read about it, is glucose-6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, G6PD deficiency. Then there could be pyruvate kinase deficiency, hexokinase deficiency, pyrimidine 5' nucleotidase deficiency. These are all enzymes in the glycolytic pathways and HMP shunt pathways. If they are abnormal, then there would be some problem related to them. Okay. Then there would be defects in globin synthesis. Okay, globin is also a part of the RBC only. So if there is reduced globin chain synthesis, that leads to a disorder, a group of disorders called thalassemias, which we'll be discussing in the next lecture. Then sickle cell anemia also, where there is some abnormal type of beta globin chain, which leads to abnormal hemoglobin. So that is also sickle cell anemia and unstable hemoglobin disease. Okay, so all these three, that is defect in the enzymes, the RBC membrane and globin chain, they are hereditary intracorpuscular defect. Whereas paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria is an example of acquired intracorpuscular defect. Next, the other causes, these all causes are acquired extracorpuscular defect, in which we have antibody mediated destruction. So we have an we can have an autoantibodies or alloantibodies which will come and which will coat the RBCs and which will cause the destruction of the RBCs. So it can be an autoimmune hemolytic anemia, in which we have subcategories of warm type, cold type antibodies. We can have hemolytic disease of the newborn, where there is Rh incompatibility. There could be transfusion reactions, where the donor is giving some antibodies to the recipients and the recipient is reacting against them. Okay. Then we have drug induced. So drugs can also cause some antibodies which are formed, and in immunity you would have read about the innocent bystander mechanism that can happen, that can cause immune hemolytic anemia in such cases. Then we have fragmentation syndrome. You would have read in your this chapter, the hemodynamics wala chapter. So there is hemolytic uremic syndrome, there is disseminated intravascular coagulation, There's thrombotic, thrombocytopenic purpura, and cardiac valves. In this, what happens, because of one reason or the other, they all may be caused by different reasons. The RBCs are getting destroyed, they're getting fragmented, they are breaking into pieces. For example, I'll tell you about cardiac valves. So when the prosthetic cardiac valves are in place, so whenever RBCs are passing through them, these cardiac valves are causing trauma to the RBCs, and RBCs are breaking down. Okay, so these RBCs are breaking down, so they are causing destruction of the RBCs, and there would be hemolysis because of these cardiac valves. Okay. Then there could be toxic or chemical injury like clostridial sepsis, snake venom, lead poisoning. Because of burns also there could be RBC destruction. Infection of RBCs by malaria or babesiosis, that can also cause. And sequestration, as I told earlier, if there is hypersplenism, that is increased in the size of the spleen. The increase in the size of the spleen would be engorged. The spleen would have increased splenic sinusoids, which will all hold the RBCs, and eventually these RBCs which are there inside the spleen, which are stagnant in the spleen, they will undergo hemolysis. Okay, so hypersplenism also can cause hemolytic anemia. These, as I told earlier, they are all acquired extracorpuscular defects. Now, I told you the hemolysis can occur in two compartments. It can be either intravascular, that is inside the blood vessel, or extravascular, that is outside the blood vessel. The extravascular compartment is usually the spleen. So it usually occurs when the RBCs are less deformable. I hope that you all have read about the term diapedesis. Okay, so so what happens, the RBCs, they undergo extreme shape changes to get through the splenic sinusoids. Now, if there is some defect which is causing the RBCs to become less deformable, so RBCs would not be able to pass through the splenic sinusoids. They get trapped inside the splenic sinusoids, and eventually the splenic macrophages, they will eat up those RBCs. Okay, now spleen has to do a lot of work in this scenario, so there would be splenomegaly. Okay, so this is what happens in extravascular hemolysis. I'll be talking about this in detail, but just to be superficially aware of this, we have to know this. Intravascular hemolysis can occur when there is mechanical injury, as I told you, in cardiac valves, in complement fixation, parasites like malaria, and certain toxins also. They can all cause intravascular hemolysis. Most of the times, extravascular hemolysis is happening. Intravascular occurs very less commonly if we talk about hemolytic anemias in general. Now, if we see the diagram on the left, there is an RBC. This is a blood vessel. Okay, so these brown things are the endothelial cells. So inside the blood vessel, if the RBC is getting destroyed because of any reason, it will release the hemoglobin. This hemoglobin can go to the kidney. It can form methemoglobin. This I'll be talking in detail in the next slide only. Okay, so this hemoglobin can go to the kidney. It can cause hemoglobinuria. It can cause hemoglobinemia. Okay, hemoglobinemia means hemoglobin is present in the peripheral blood. So hemoglobinemia would be there, hemoglobinuria would be there, and this hemoglobin can be converted into this will be reabsorbed by the proximal tubular cells, and when these cells are shed in the urine, this can be a cause of hemosideruria because that will have iron. Okay, so in intravascular hemolysis, you have hemoglobinemia, hemoglobinuria, and hemosideruria. Okay. Now, on the right, if we see the diagram, it is a macrophage which is ingesting the RBC. This will occur definitely in extravascular sites because you don't have a macrophage which will eat the RBCs normally in the intravascular location. Okay, so this macrophage, it will eat the RBC. Now, what will the components do? The globin, it is formed of amino acids, so amino acids will go in the amino acids pool of the body. Iron is released, it will bind to the transferrin. Iron also goes to the iron pool. The protoporphyrin, it undergoes, it forms bilirubin. Bilirubin goes to the liver to form conjugated bilirubin. It goes to the intestine, to the gut, where stercobilin is formed, which is released in the feces. This one is reabsorbed in the kidney and urobilinogen is there in the urine. So if we see the major differences between the intravascular and extravascular hemolysis, in intravascular you have hemoglobinemia, you have hemoglobinuria, you have hemosideruria. Whereas in extravascular hemolysis, you have stercobilin in the feces, you have urobilinogen, which will increase in the in the urine. Okay, but it doesn't have hemoglobinuria or hemoglobinemia most of the times. Okay, so this was intravascular and this was extravascular hemolysis. Now, a bit detail about the intravascular hemolysis. If the RBCs are lysed in the blood vessels, there will be free hemoglobin. This free hemoglobin, normally what it does, it binds to haptoglobin. So haptoglobin is very important thing. Okay, haptoglobin is very important thing because haptoglobin it binds to the free hemoglobin. So jitna haptoglobin tha, it forms the hemoglobin haptoglobin complex and it goes to the liver, and where it destroys it breaks it down into heme and globin, and heme does its work and globin does its work. Okay. If the free hemoglobin is much more, as in when there is too much of hemolysis happening, the haptoglobin will get exhausted. So there will be one time till haptoglobin khatam ho chuka hai. Then what will we do? The hemoglobin, the free hemoglobin, it will bind to the methemoglobin then. Okay. In the methemoglobin, the globin gets released, the metheme with albumin, it forms a metheme albumin complex. Sorry. Okay. So this metheme albumin, it forms a complex with hemopexin. You need not go in much detail. I'm just telling you so that you understand this. So this metheme and hemopexin complex, it comes to the liver, where again the heme is released. Okay. From the heme, the iron goes as transferrin. Okay. The heme is converted to biliverdin, to bilirubin, and the bilirubin diglucuronide, that is the conjugation of bilirubin takes place. And from here, you know the story. The bilirubin, it will go to the intestine where the urobilinogen is formed. It will be released in the intestine from the kidney in the urine. Okay, so urobilinogen will be increased, but apart from that, you have these free hemoglobin. Okay, this free hemoglobin also goes to the kidney, so it causes hemoglobinuria. Okay, this hemoglobin, when it gets absorbed in the PCT, okay, so PCT के cells जो hemoglobin का iron है वो अपने अंदर रख लेते हैं. When these cells are shed in the urine, what it is called? It is called hemosideruria. Okay, so you have these three things which will occur in intravascular hemolysis. You have hemoglobinuria, hemosideruria, increased urobilinogen, and apart from that, you have hemoglobinemia also, increased free hemoglobin in the blood also. Okay. Okay. Now, once we have read about this intravascular and extravascular hemolysis, now let's go to the common features of all the hemolytic anemias. So we have read anemia to hoga hi because RBCs are getting destroyed. Second is increased indirect bilirubin. Because the RBCs are getting destroyed, the RBCs are overwhelming the capacity of liver to conjugate. So indirect bilirubin would increase in hemolysis, that is for sure. Okay, the direct will also increase, but indirect will be definitely increased. So there will be jaundice. Third is increased reticulocyte percentage. I hope that all of you know what is reticulocyte. Reticulocyte is an immature RBC. It is an immature RBC only. It is the later stage of formation of RBCs. Okay, so just before the release of mature RBCs in the peripheral blood, they are called reticulocyte. They still have some remnants of the nuclear material, and they usually mature in the peripheral blood as RBCs. Okay, so as the mature RBCs. Okay. And then there will be increase in the level of LDH. So LDH is an enzyme which is present in the RBCs. So when the RBCs are destroying, the LDH levels will increase. RBC lifespan would reduce definitely, and decrease serum haptoglobin levels, which is much more reduced in intravascular hemolysis as compared to extravascular hemolysis. So these are the common features which you will see in all the hemolytic anemias. Now, I told you there would be destruction, increased destruction, and then there would be compensatory mechanisms, that is increased bone marrow activity and RBC production. Okay, so destruction is happening at one pace and body is trying to recover and body is trying to compensate for that destruction by increasing the RBC production. So what will you see in the blood? In the blood, you will see reticulocytosis. So reticulocytes usually you see in supravital staining. Okay, so if you do new methylene blue, you do brilliant crucyl blue, so this is what you will see. So this kind of cells, which you will see that these blue dots which you are seeing, this is a new methylene blue staining, which is a supravital staining in which you can see the nuclear remnants still in these cells. Okay, so this is called reticulocytes. These are called reticulocytes. They would be increased when the bone marrow is trying to increase the production. So it is like sending the immature cells in the periphery very quickly. Okay, so normally 1 to 1.5% is the normal reticulocyte count, and in this case, in hemolytic anemias, it can increase % also. Okay. Polychromatophilia is a thing which we call in the peripheral blood on your Romnowski stains. So these are the normal RBCs. If you can appreciate, they are red or reddish brown in color, depending on the type of staining that you have. But you have these, okay, you have these larger cells which are slightly larger. They have a bit bluish tinge to them. Okay, so these are what we call as the polychromatophils. Polychromatophil name comes from the fact that they have a dual staining, double colored staining. You have a dual double colored staining. So you have a bluish and reddish staining in them. Okay, so that is why they are called polychromatophils. So they are basically what they are the counterparts of these reticulocytes only, but in the Giemsa or your Romnowski stain, this is what you will see. So polychromatophilia ho jata hai in the peripheral blood. Also, you have erythroblastosis. Erythroblastosis is nothing but presence of nucleated RBCs. Like here, if you can see, these are RBCs only. These are immature RBCs, but they have nucleus. So the bone marrow is trying to compensate for RBC destruction so much that it has sent all the immature RBCs in the peripheral circulation. So you see nucleated RBCs. Also, what will you see? You will see leukocytosis and thrombocytosis. Why? Because the bone marrow is in general hyperproductive. So it is producing so many cells, apart from RBCs also, it will produce WBCs also and platelets also. Okay. And in bone marrow, you will see erythroid hyperplasia definitely. So if you see this picture, this particular picture, all these cells, whatever cells you can point out, this, they're all erythroid cells. Normally the ME ratio, it can vary from 3:1 to 15:1. Also, the myeloid to erythroid ratio in a normal bone marrow. But in so what I'm trying to say is normally the myeloid series is the predominant one in the bone marrow. But when there is erythroid hyperplasia, when the bone marrow is trying to produce more RBCs, so there will be reversal of ME ratio. This is what we say, the myeloid to erythroid ratio. Myeloid to erythroid ratio, the ME ratio. Okay, so this will be reversed. So erythroid would increase than myeloid. Okay, so that will happen. Now, laboratory evaluation of hemolysis. So there will be certain things which will be common to both intravascular and extravascular hemolysis, and there will be certain features which will be specific to one type of hemolysis. Let's see what is that. In hematologic parameters, if you see, both of them will have polychromatophils in the peripheral blood, reticulocyte count would be increased, and in bone marrow, erythroid hyperplasia is there. So with the help of these, you cannot differentiate if this is an intravascular or extravascular hemolysis. Okay, coming on to plasma or serum markers. Bilirubin is increased in both. There would be jaundice, and both of them will have unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Now the point comes with haptoglobin. Okay, haptoglobin is usually or what almost always absent in intravascular hemolysis because there is so much of free hemoglobin which has to be bound to haptoglobin that it is absent. Okay, haptoglobin can be reduced in extravascular hemolysis. It can also be absent, but in intravascular hemolytic it will always be absent. Plasma hemoglobin is excessively increased in intravascular hemolysis, and LDH levels are also excessively increased in LDH in this your intravascular hemolysis. Okay, in urine, as I told you, urine bilirubin would not be increased in both the cases. However, hemosiderin urea and hemoglobin urea will be seen in cases of intravascular hemolysis. So if we see, we can differentiate intravascular and extravascular hemolysis on the basis of serum haptoglobulin absent, excessively increased plasma hemoglobin, that is hemoglobinemia, and increased lactate dehydrogenase levels. Also, hemosiderin urea and hemoglobin urea, that will also be seen in intravascular hemolysis. So these are the two things with which you can differentiate intravascular and extravascular hemolysis. Okay, somebody has asked me to point the erythroid precursors once again. And why does so all these cells, these bigger ones, these smaller ones, ठीक है ये सब except for the neutrophil जैसी जो चीज दिख रही है आपको, everything else are erythroid precursors. There are no other cells except for this one, maybe a monocyte. Okay, this one is a band form. Otherwise, everything else is an erythroid precursor. Also, LDH level is increased because LDH is an enzyme which is present in the RBC. So when the RBC will lies in the intravascular circulation, so there will be increase in the level of LDH in the serum. Okay. So clinical manifestation of any hemolytic anemia, it can be either acute or insidious. Okay. There would be anemia, there would be jaundice, there would be signs and symptoms which can be specific to the type of hemolytic anemia also. So splenomegaly is most commonly seen in congenital hemolytic anemias except for sickle cell. Some of the acquired hemolytic anemias also may show this, and splenomegaly is seen when you have extravascular hemolysis. Okay, so extravascular hemolysis is what is characterized by splenomegaly. Also, cholelithiasis can occur. So cholelithiasis or gallstone, it is a very common disease when you have increased or chronic hemolysis. Okay, so when there is chronic hemolysis, so there would be increased biliary excretion of bilirubin. Okay, that promotes formation of gallstones, and not just any gallstones. It promotes the production of pigment gallstones. So when you read later on, you will know that there are 2-3 types of gallstones, and of that, pigment gallstones are characteristically seen in cases of this thing, hemolysis. Okay, they are brown or black in color, and they are seen when there is hemolysis. Then there could be skeletal abnormalities. For example, in thalassemia, I think we will leave this for the next lecture because we'll be discussing in detail about thalassemia. Then there could be crisis. So what is a crisis? A crisis is something which, if a patient is doing fine, if the patient is of chronic hemolytic disease, the patient has hemolysis, the body has come to a hemostasis, uska hemoglobin itna hi rahega, matlab there is hemolysis going on, there is production of RBCs going on, the body has formed a hemostasis. But on top of that, there is excessive hemolysis occurring. That is called hemolytic crisis. That is on top of a baseline layer of chronic hemolytic disease. If there is excessive hemolysis suddenly, that is called hemolytic crisis. And then there could be one more crisis which is called aplastic crisis. So this is exactly opposite of hemolytic crisis. And aplastic crisis, the bone marrow shuts down. It occurs when there is human parvovirus B19 infection. So that destroys the erythroid precursors. So in bone marrow, there would be reduction in the erythroid or other precursors also. So this is called aplastic crisis. And then changes in urine color, there would be hemoglobin urea, hemosiderin urea, which can occur. Okay, before we proceed, what is this? Greece. Good, Maima. Okay, so this is Santorini Island in Greece. Very nice, Vishwarakesh, very nice. Beautiful place, isn't it? Probably when the pandemic goes, we all can think of going to such places. Okay, so Sheetal has asked, why is haptoglobulin decreased or absent in extravascular hemolysis? Although in extravascular hemolysis, all the RBC, all the hemoglobin which is released is entrapped by the splenic cells and they take care of it, but some of the hemoglobin it still escapes. Okay, so whatever hemoglobin it escapes and goes to the circulation, that hemoglobin is it is entrapped by the haptoglobin and thereby the haptoglobulin level will decrease. Okay. Okay. Now we are coming, we've talked about the general features of all the hemolytic anemia. Now we will be discussing about a few of the common hemolytic anemias. So the first is the RBC membrane disorders. In this, I told you there would be so many things which are there, but the most common is hereditary spherocytosis, which we'll be discussing. You have other things also, hereditary eleptocytosis, pyropoikilocytosis, South Asian ovalocytosis, stomatocytosis. Basically, because there is membrane disorder, so there would be difference, there would be abnormalities in the RBC shape. Okay. So if we are talking about membrane disorder, let's see the RBC membrane. That will be a quick revision for you all because I hope that all of you remember what you read in physiology. Okay. So RBC membrane, it has these spectrin dimers, alpha beta chains. They are linked to the band 3 protein in the membrane with the help of two connecting proteins. So you have ankyrin and you have protein 4.2. Okay. Let's see here. Spectrin chains. This is ankyrin. Protein 4.2 hoga yahan pe. It is not shown. And then this is glycophorin and this is band 3 protein. Okay. So these are the proteins which form the skeletal structure of RBCs. Now who's going to tell me what is the normal shape of an RBC? Normal shape of an RBC. Why am I calling it something abnormal? Biconcave, biconcave. Thank you so much. Okay. It is a biconcave disc. Okay. Good. Thank you so much. So it is normally a biconcave. So it is something, please pardon my drawing. It is something like this. It is a biconcave disc. And why am I bothered here? It is a spherocytosis, what we have here. So from biconcave, it becomes a spherocyte. Okay. So this is the problem which is occurring, and let's see how this problem occurs. So it is a defect in RBC membrane. It can be because of ankyrin mutation, spectrin mutation, combined spectrin and ankyrin deficiency, band 3 deficiency, protein 4.2 defect. Because of anything, it can occur. Because of any of these mutations, it can occur. Now, what exactly is this? So it is an autosomal dominant disorder in which there is some problem with the RBC membrane and it forms the spherocytic red cells. Okay, so red cells become spheres around and they're fragile also. Okay, see these spherocytes, they're less flexible. First thing, they're less flexible. I told you when the cells are less flexible, they are more amenable to be held inside the splenic sinusoids and destroyed by the splenic macrophages. एक तो वो चीज हो गई. दूसरी, they are more permeable to sodium. So if they are more permeable to sodium, they are more permeable to the water getting inside and the cell bursting because of the osmotic pressure, and there would be hemolysis because of that. Okay, it is an autosomal dominant disorder. So if even one of the parent has this disorder, then the child will definitely have this disorder. Okay, depending on the severity, it can be mild, moderate, severe, whatever. But the parent, it is like an autosomal dominant disorder. Let's see the pathophysiology, what happens. It is a primary membrane skeletal defect which reduces the membrane stability because there is some defect in one or either of the proteins. Okay, so because of reduced stability, there is membrane loss which is occurring. Okay, the membrane will keep on chipping and it will keep on going away. Okay, so when the membrane loss is happening, now the volume of the surface, it reduces. Okay, the least surface to volume ratio is maintained by spherocytes only, the spheres only, we have read in physics all. Okay, so this forms a spherocytes. These spherocytes are less deformable, as I told earlier, so there would be splenic trapping. Diapedesis nahi ho pati, so there would be splenic trapping. Now once they are trapped in the spleen, there would be erythrostasis, that is stasis of the RBCs, Now, once they're sitting there, there is no oxygen, there is no glucose. Okay, so the glucose reduces. They resort to anaerobic glycolysis, so there will be reduced pH. So, because of all these things which are happening, there is these cells are amenable to lyse themselves also, and there would be phagocytosis by the splenic macrophages, which cause extravascular hemolysis. And this erythrostasis, whichever is occurring, this will go on and this will cause membrane loss, and this vicious circle goes on. Let's see how does this occur. So this is a normal RBC. This was the shape of the RBC as you all told, biconcave. अब this biconcave RBC, अब जब यहाँ पे ये stasis हो गया ना, जब पहली बार जब वो यहाँ से गया था, and first time splenic trapping हुई, there would be erythrostasis, decreased glucose, decreased pH. So there would be some part of the membrane which is lost because of the membrane stability, decreased membrane stability also, and because of this thing also, erythrostasis, this part of the membrane is lost. So this part of membrane is getting lost again and again in repeated cycles of it passing through the spleen. Eventually, what does this form? It forms a spherocyte. It is a small round cell. Okay, and just see what is this. The comparison of the size. This cell has become this cell. Okay, the amount of hemoglobin is the same in this, so it will be a more concentrated, smaller cell. Okay, and this RBC is less deformable. If it goes into the splenic macrosinusoids, it will not be able to find its way through it, and the splenic macrophages will eventually go and eat this cell. So this is the pathophysiology of the hemolysis in hereditary spherocytosis. So there is a chronic hemolytic anemia. There is some level of hemolysis which is going on in this patient all the time. There would be massive splenomegaly. I told you, extravascular hemolysis, so there would be splenomegaly. There would be polylithiasis, which also I told you, and there could be crisis also. In such situations, there could be aplastic crisis, there could be hemolytic crisis, okay, which I'll be talking in just a while. Okay, so if we talk about the laboratory investigations, we know how does the hemolysis occur. Now what will you see? There could be mild to moderate anemia, because there is some form of hemolysis which is going on and body is trying to compensate for that by increasing the RBC production. If we talk about MCV, you all know what is MCV? MCV is mean corpuscular volume. So it is the volume of an RBC. So if it is a normal RBC, if just for representation purpose, if this is the volume of a normal RBC, a microcytic cell would be a smaller MCV. Okay, and a macrocytic cell, macro वाला होता है ना, a macrocytic cell would have a greater MCV. Okay. Now, इसका MCV usually normal क्यों होता है? क्योंकि MCV is mean. So it takes mean of so many cells. So here you have a microspherocyte जो कि बन गया था, which has a low MCV. तो microspherocyte कुछ ऐसा इस stage पे आ जाएगा, ठीक है? Whereas you have reticulocytes also, which I've read कि any hemolytic anemia will have reticulocytes. So reticulocytes are slightly larger cells. So they will have a higher MCV. So they will have something like this. तो इन दोनों का अगर आप मीन निकालोगे तो मीन का वैल्यू जो आएगा that will come to normal. Okay. So you have MCV usually normal. This I'm talking about the CBC जो blood count जो machine का count होता है ये उसमें. MCH is normal, but MCHC is increased. It is more than 36%, and it is the only condition in which MCHC can be truly increased. Let's see the previous picture, you will understand. So this is the normal cell जिसकी mean corpuscular जिसका volume has been reduced to this size. Okay, so MCV in this microspherocyte is reduced, but mean hemoglobin concentration of this particular cell would be increased क्योंकि इसका volume तो कम है, but the amount of hemoglobin is the same as this बड़ा cell. Okay, so MCHC, which is the mean hemoglobin concentration, mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, that will be increased. So that will be more than 36%. Okay, so that will be more than 36%, and you should know that this is a condition in which MCHC is increased. After CBC, let's come to the peripheral smear. In the peripheral smear, you will see microspherocytes, which are small, dense RBCs without central pallor. And apart from that, varying degree of polychromasia, nucleated RBCs, and isopoikilocytosis that will be seen. That is common to all the hemolytic anemias. So you will see polychromasia, that is reticulocytes बढ़ जाएंगे, nucleated RBC, that will be common. So let's see if you can appreciate. There are cells with central pallor. These are the cells with central pallor. Okay, and then you can see these small, relatively smaller, darker staining cells. Okay, see in this picture, the smaller and darker staining cells without any central pallor. These are the microspherocytes. Okay, so these microspherocytes are the cells which will give you a diagnosis of hereditary spherocytosis. In this picture, in the left one, if you see, you can see these are the polychromatophils. This one is polychromatophil. This one is polychromatophil. So these were all are larger. They have a bluish tinge. And then you have this cell, which is a nucleated RBC. So this picture will give you a feature that this is a hemolytic anemia which is going on. But if you see these microspherocytes, that gives you an idea which type of hemolytic anemia it is, because this is hereditary spherocytosis. Okay, in bone marrow, we have normoblastic erythroid hyperplasia. Basically, there is erythroid hyperplasia, which is normal. But eventually, bone marrow produce karte, body can also have deficiency of other things. You can have folate deficiency, you can have B12 deficiency, क्योंकि कितना produce करेगी ना body. So you can have megaloblastic features also. Myeloid, that is WBC and platelets, they are formed normally. However, there would be increased iron stores, and this you will see in all the hemolytic anemias, because the RBCs are getting destroyed. The iron of that, it is going in the stores. Okay, so you have increased iron stores in such cases. In biochemistry, you will see increased bilirubin, increased fecal urobilinogen. LDH would also be increased, although it will not be excessively increased as seen in intravascular hemolysis, and serum haptoglobulin will also be reduced to some extent. Fecal urobilinogen would be increased because it is an extravascular hemolysis which is going on. And immunohematology, if you see the direct antiglobulin test, that is the Coombs test, it is negative. So it differentiates this type of hemolysis, hemolytic anemia, from autoimmune hemolytic anemia, where there are antibodies which are present against the RBCs, and they would be detected by this DAT or Coombs test. So what are the diagnostic tests? Now this whatever I've told you, they are generic features which will be seen in all types of hemolytic anemia. The diagnostic tests for hereditary spherocytosis, first is osmotic fragility test. So these RBCs which have formed the microspherocytes, they are very susceptible to lysis. So these spherocytes, they lyse sooner than the normal red cells when the cells are incubated in decreasing concentration of sodium chloride. Okay, so when you are putting in increasing or decreasing concentration of sodium chloride, the osmotic fragility is increased in these cells. Autohemolysis test also based on that principle only, that RBCs are incubated at 37 degrees Celsius for 48 hours. The degree of hemolysis is increased when spherocytes are present. And final diagnostic test could be the membrane protein analysis. आप कर सकते हो कि if this protein is present, if suppose you are suspecting that enchirine protein deficiency is there, then you can do a membrane protein analysis using gel electrophoresis. And if membrane protein, if suppose enchirine protein is absent, that you can visualize that using gel electrophoresis. So this is the osmotic fragility test. In this, we characteristically say here we give sodium chloride percentage. Okay, in this axis, and the lysis, that is the hemolysis that is seen, that will be seen on this axis. Okay, so the yellow one is the normal range. Here the hemolysis is starting at 0.5%. Okay, if you can appreciate, the hemolysis is starting here, whereas in hereditary spherocytosis, the hemolysis is starting from here only. Okay, so the hemolysis is starting very early, even with less concentration of sodium chloride, and the shift is the curve is shift to the right. Okay, and it basically tests the resistance of hemolysis of RBCs exposed to hypotonic solution. And the sooner the hemolysis occurs, the greater is the osmotic fragility of RBCs. Spherocytes are lysed very quickly when placed in hypotonic saline. Now, this is increased osmotic fragility. There are conditions when you have reduced osmotic fragility also, like thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, and iron deficiency anemia. So, even when somebody asks you this, you should also know that there could be conditions where the cells are more resistant to hemolysis. Okay, so there could be thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, iron deficiency anemia. Now, what can be the complications? The complications are the crisis situations that can occur. So, there could be hemolytic crisis, which is usually associated when there is infection. So, that the body is under a stress. So, in stress, there is increased hemolysis. So, there would be rapid fall in the hemoglobin. The reticulocyte count would increase, and increase in serum bilirubin would occur over and above what the patient was having initially. Second is aplastic crisis. Aplastic crisis, as I told, it occurs with parvovirus B19 infection, and it leads to bone marrow suppression, and there would be reticulocytopenia. That is, reticulocyte count would reduce, and it is because of suppression of the erythroid precursors in the bone marrow. Treatment, splenectomy can be a good treatment because the source where the RBCs are getting destroyed, you are removing that source. So that will correct the anemia, but the membrane defect will still remain. Okay. So a lot of you have questions. I think let's just take them right now. Okay. Bachi has asked, ma'am, means in hereditary spherocytosis, initially the RBC is formed as biconcave, disc-shaped only, and later on becomes spherical due to erythrostasis and membrane. Yes, the RBC initially when they were formed, they were like normal, but because there is membrane defect, the RBCs will keep on losing part of its membrane, and then it will become spherical or microspherocyte. Okay. See, MCH and MCV, Kshitish has asked, MCHC is MCH over MCV. What is, before that, Kshitish, go and read what are the measurable, what are the indices which are measured in the counter and what are calculated. Okay. Then you will come to know what is there. But in microspherocytes, what has happened, your MCH is normal, mean corpuscular hemoglobin amount is normal, but the volume is less. So you will eventually have increased of MCHC. That is there. Kartikeya has asked why megakaryopoiesis is normal, because it is not affecting other cells. It is only affecting the erythroid precursors, because the erythroid precursors are only trying to increase in number to compensate for the hemolysis which is going on. Osmotic fragility graph. Okay. So osmotic fragility, in this we are taking concentration of sodium chloride. Okay. Saline का concentration आपने यहाँ से यहाँ तक बढ़ाना शुरू किया. Okay. So this is the percentage lysis. इस percentage पे 100% hemolysis हो गई है. This yellow one is normal patient. This one is red one is the hereditary spherocytosis का case. Now hereditary spherocytosis पे if you see 0.7% saline is normal for us. ठीक है ना? तो जैसे जैसे आप कम करते रहते हो परसेंटेज सलाइन की, ठीक है, 0.7 इज नॉर्मल, जैसे मतलब 0.7 से 0.6% सलाइन भी हुआ है, वहीं पे हेमोलिसिस शुरू हो गई है इन हेरिडिटरी स्क्लेरोसाइटोसिस. Whereas it has started after 0.5% saline. It has started to some extent only in the normal patients. So the hemolysis starts early, although the final 0.100% hemolysis would be reached at the same percentage. That would not matter, but this curve is shifted to the right. Okay, so that is what it is. Okay, I hope that okay, let's move on to the next one. This is RBC enzyme defects. In this, you have the enzymes of the glycolysis pathway, the HMP shunt pathway. The most common and the most important is glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. There could be others like pyruvate kinase, hexokinase, pyrimidine 5' nucleotidase deficiency. Now, G6PD deficiency, it is the first enzyme of HMP shunt pathway, and it is a major pathway of NADPH production. I hope that you remember it from your biochemistry. And NADPH is required for preventing oxidative damage to RBCs. Okay. Now, when there is a defect in this enzyme, NADPH nahi banega, NADPH is not there. So these cells are susceptible to oxidant-induced hemolysis. This is an X-linked recessive disorder. Males are affected more, definitely. Now, the defect in this case is reduced G6PD activity in the red cells. Now, depending on the amount of activity is reduced, that is, there will be certain cells in which only 5% activity is remaining. There will be certain cells, there will be certain cases, certain patients in which only 5% activity is remaining. There will be certain जिनमें 10% होगी. Depending on the amount and the severity of deficiency and the degree of hemolysis, the disease is categorized in class 1 to class 4 G6PD deficiency. Now, what is important is that older red cells are affected more because they don't produce this enzyme. So, if there was an intrinsically deficiency of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, these RBCs will not produce any more enzyme. And the enzyme activity will fall as the cell ages. So, whenever there is an oxidant stress to certain cells, they will not be able to compensate that and they will die. Okay. Now, silver lining to this is that G6PD deficient patients are resistant to infection by malaria. So whenever this G6PD is endemic, there is no malaria in such areas because there is reduced ribose metabolites which are required for malarial nucleic acid production. You can go back to your biochemistry and just read about your this HMP shunt pathway and the ribose metabolism. Okay, so just for you to know, depending on the amount of residual enzyme activity, the disease is categorized as very severe, moderate, or none. So if you have up to 60% of the enzyme activity, then it is up to, even if 60% is there, I'm sorry, it is not 150%, it's 100%. Even if 60% is there, then also the patient will not have any features. But very severe disease is one when you have less than 2% of the residual enzyme activity. Biochemical basis, I hope you all know, glucose converted to glucose 6-phosphate. With the help of G6PD, it gets converted to 6-phosphogluconate. यहाँ पे एक NADPH gets converted to NADPH. So NADPH is the one which we want. It causes with the oxidant stress GSH converted to GSSG. The glutathione peroxidase यहाँ पे काम करता है. और NADPH is the one which will help in the reducing this oxidant stress. Okay. Now, अब हमारे पेशेंट में G6PD तो है नहीं, तो फिर क्या हुआ? NADPH का लेवल रिड्यूस हो जाएगा. तो ये वाला स्टेप जो है, this to this, it cannot get converted. Okay, so you have more of this, and apart from this glutathione, you have other areas where also this oxidant can act. So it will cause RBC membrane damage. It will cause damage to the hemoglobin, forming Heinz body, which I will just tell. Okay. Now, how does the hemolysis occur in such cases? There is an oxidant stress to a G6PD deficient RBC. So it is not happening to all the RBCs. It is only in the G6PD deficient RBCs, which are usually the older ones. Okay. So the oldies will have the oxidant stress. So what will happen? The oxidant stress को हमारे पास antioxidants तो है नहीं. So what will we do? There will be cross-linking of the reactive sulfhydryl groups on globin chains. This happens as a result of the oxidative stress, and then this causes denaturation of the globin chains of the hemoglobin, denatured hemoglobin, which will be precipitated as a membrane-bound precipitate known as Heinz bodies. Okay, so these Heinz bodies, I'll just show you how do they look like. They are like membrane-bound precipitates. They are like membrane-bound things which are stuck to the membranes. Now, when the cell goes to the spleen, because every cell has to go through spleen, when it goes to the spleen, the macrophages found this Heinz body, they found that this is something abnormal. They will bite this Heinz body out of it. So they will form a cell called a bite cell or a blister cell. I'll just show you the photographs right now. And these bite cells, they are less deformable cells. Eventually, when they go again to the spleen, they're less deformable. They get trapped in the spleen. Here, extravascular hemolysis occurs. Also, because of this denaturation of the membrane-bound and the membrane-bound precipitate which is being formed, there is some form of membrane damage which leads to intravascular hemolysis. So in G6PD, you will have both intravascular and extravascular hemolysis going on. Now, what is Heinz bodies? Heinz bodies are these. Okay, these blue things. इसको हमने special stain से किया है, supravital stain से हमने stain किया है, so that you can see the denatured protein which is there. So crystal violet is the stain that we have used. So this is a denatured protein which will get precipitated as a membrane-bound thing. Now, when the cell goes to the spleen finds this something suspicious. This will take a bite of this and form a thing called a bite cell. Okay, you can see that a bite has been taken from this cell. Complete अगर membrane को भी हटा लिया तो bite बनता है. Agar at times the part of membrane remains intact, that is called a blister cell. I'll just show you that. What does that look like? Okay, this bite cell when it goes to the spleen again, अब इसके इतने spicules हैं कैसे निकलेगा spleen से बाहर ना? So what will they do? The spleen will find it. It will get trapped in the spleen, and the macrophages will just eat away. Okay. Now, hemolysis होती कब है in cases में? So there are certain precipitating factors for hemolysis in G6PD deficiency. Intake of oxidant drugs like antibiotics, which importantly the sulfa drugs, antimalarials like chloroquine, primaquine, and antipyretics. Then exposure to infections, and importantly ingestion to fava beans. So favism या Mediterranean variant में ये काफी common होता है. In the regions where fava beans are taken more, they are eaten as a part of their meals. Okay, so such patients in such areas, these patients will develop hemolysis when the patient has had fava beans. So hemolysis कैसे होता है? It occurs 2 to 3 days after the exposure. कोई भी खाया है जब भी उन्होंने ऑक्सीडेंट स्ट्रेस वाली चीज खाई है तो उसके बाद acute intravascular hemolysis होगा, but it will be all self-limiting episode. Why? Because only the old RBCs are susceptible. They had less amount of G6PD. The newer ones, they have G6PD. They will take care of the oxidative stress. So only the older RBCs, they are getting destroyed. So it will be a self-limited episode. So it will actually, this clinically presents as an intermittent hemolysis or intermittent jaundice also these patients can present with. Okay. So this is how they present. But the feature of chronic hemolysis, like chronic hemolysis features like splenomegaly, like gallstones, they're usually absent in such cases because they don't have a chronic hemolysis going on. They have intermittent hemolysis, which is very important to know. Now for diagnosis, CBC and reticulocyte count, hemoglobin reduced, definitely, reticulocyte high. Peripheral smear, you would have bite cell, I showed you. You can have blister cell also. So this is also a blister cell in which a part of the Heinz body has been taken off, but membrane is still intact. The macrophage has not eaten the whole of the membrane. So you will have a blister cell like this. Polychromatophils like this one, you can have it in the peripheral smear. Okay, so that is a feature of all the hemolytic anemias. And then Heinz body on supravital staining, crystal violet, you have seen, Heinz body will be seen. Now, for enzyme defect per se, now how do you confirm this? First is the screening method. Screening test is done. Basically, जो भी सारे tests हैं, they are all based on the oxidative stress is given to the RBCs, and if they are not, the screening test is basically that you're giving oxidative stress to the RBCs and they are not able to combat that. So there is a qualitative assessment test for G6PD enzymatic activity, methyl reduction test. It is an obsolete test now. We don't do it anymore. Okay, so it is a methyl reduction test just for you to know. I'm not going to go in detail of this, but for that, so that you know about it. Confirmatory test you can do. You can quantitatively measure the G6PD enzymatic activity by using PCR, or molecular tests can be used for detecting the G6PD gene mutation. Okay. So when you're talking about the lab D, you should know, you should be able to enumerate these things. If not go in details, nobody is going to ask you the details, you should be able to tell. What is this? Last topic remaining. Five more minutes. What is this? उससे पहले ये बताओ. Christ the Redeemer, yeah, Christ the Redeemer. कहाँ पे? Brazil, Rio, yes. Good. सबने बहुत अच्छी geography पढ़ी हुई है. Very nice. Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Good. Now we're coming to the last topic of today. Paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, which is the only acquired intracorpuscular defect of RBC. So it is an acquired stem cell defect. So it is a hematopoietic stem cell defect which affects, because it is affecting all the stem cells. So it will affect the RBCs, WBCs, platelets, all of them. Okay, so there is a somatic mutation. Because there is a somatic mutation, that is why it is acquired, which could be deletion or point mutation of the PIG-A gene, that is phosphatidyl inositol glycoside glycan class A gene on the X chromosome. Okay, important thing, X chromosome, somatic mutation, PIG-A gene. So PIG-A gene क्या करता है? It causes the synthesis of GPI anchor protein. Now, what are these GPI anchor proteins? So these are certain proteins which are present on the cell surface. They could be enzymes, adhesion molecules, complement regulating proteins. Important ones I've highlighted. So neutrophil alkaline phosphatase, NAP, present on the neutrophils. Okay. Complement regulating surface proteins like decay acceleration factors, DAF or CD55, which is present in all RBCs or blood cells, and membrane inhibitor of reactive lysis, MIRL or CD59, which are present in all blood cells. These two are the most important because they are the ones which cause the hemolysis. Why is NAP important? Because it helps in diagnosis. I've not covered this in this one, but NAP is one enzyme test which we do on the slide. So if these cells, they are deficient in NAP, okay, there is GPI linked protein ka deficiency, so there would be deficiency of NAP. So the NAP score, NAP या LAP, NAP score, neutrophil alkaline phosphatase या leukocyte alkaline phosphatase score would be reduced in such cases. Okay. Now let's come to the pathophysiology of PNH. What happens? There is missing cell surface GPI linked proteins. The important ones are CD55 and 59. 55 is membrane inhibitor of reactive lysis and 55 is decay acceleration factor. They are both complement regulating proteins. So in the absence of these two, the RBCs are susceptible to complement mediated lysis. Okay. But depending on the amount of the mutation which is present, the amount of normal cells that there are three types of cells. Okay. So type 1 cells are almost normal cells. Type 3 cells are the ones which are very sensitive to complement mediated lysis. So like 1/25th of the amount of complement, even if that is given, that we call lysis of these cells. And type 2 are intermediate between type 1 and type 3. Okay, so type 3 cells are the ones which are the most dangerous. They are the ones which are most susceptible to complement mediated lysis. So type 2 and type 3 cells, if they are present, they will be increased susceptible to complement mediated lysis. And the patient, it is not necessary that if one patient has PNH, he will have all the type 3 cells or type 2 cells. The patient can have combination of these cells. The patient can have like 70% type 1 cells, and the patient can have 90% type 1 cells and only 2% of type 3 cells. But such patients will also have hemolysis, but it will not be that much. Okay, so the patient can have permutation and combination of type 1, 2, 3 cells. Okay, and the hemolysis will depend कि type 1, type 2 or type 3 cells कितने percentage में है. So there is a triad of features. First is hemolysis, which is intravascular. Okay, what I'm showing you here, it is the urine. Okay, intravascular hemolysis will have hemoglobinuria. And hemoglobinuria, so the urine color would be darker. इसका नाम ही है paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. So there would be hemoglobinuria at night होता है. तो अगर ये अर्ली मॉर्निंग का सैंपल पहला सैंपल लेंगे तो दैट विल बी दिस डार्क एंड इवेंचुअली रात में हेमोलिसिस होती है. उसके बाद जब लेटर ऑन द डे का करेंगे तो फिर द यूरिन वुड बी नॉर्मल लाइक दिस. So intravascular hemolysis can cause disabling symptoms like abdominal pain, dysphagia, severe lethargy. Second feature is thrombosis. Usually liver या cerebral arteries में होता है. Can be seen in 50% of patients. 33% of patients may this thrombosis can be fatal. And third is aplastic anemia. Eventually, basically cytopenias, सारे blood cells का count reduce हो जाता है. Bone marrow failure, it usually precedes PNH. और basically कोई PNH का clone है which is being selected in the cytopenias and then the patient has PNH. The hemolysis कैसे होता है? The degree of hemolysis it will depend on the cell type. कौन सा है PNH 1, 2, 3 और PNH 1, 2, 3 में भी कितने PNH 3 cells हैं? If there are predominantly PNH type 3 cells, तो patient को ज़्यादा hemolysis होगा, ठीक है? And third point is complement activation. That is infection, allergies, transfusion reaction, etc. So, जब भी complement activation होगा, there will be increased hemolysis. And depending on the susceptibility of cells, जो ज़्यादा susceptible cells हैं, type 3 cells हैं, तो ज़्यादा hemolysis होगा. Next is there is intravascular hemolysis. So dark colored urine is seen in early morning. Why? Because during sleep pH decreases. RBCs are prone to complement mediated lysis when the pH is reduced. Okay, so इसलिए first morning sample dark color का आता है, इसीलिए इसका नाम है paroxysmal as an intermittent, nocturnal रात में hemoglobinuria. Okay, thrombosis, why does it occur? क्योंकि complement gets activated in the platelets also, so there would be increased platelet aggregation, enhanced expression of tissue factor, impaired fibrinolysis. So अब depending on thrombosis कहाँ हो रही है, thrombosis can occur in hepatic vein, which we call as Budd-Chiari syndrome. The patient can have jaundice, abdominal pain, hepatomegaly. Abdominal vein की thrombosis हो सकती है, जिसकी वजह से intestines का infarction हो सकता है. There could be cerebral vein thrombosis, which can cause papilledema and pseudotumor cerebri. There could be dermal vein thrombosis, which can cause painful red nodules on the skin. The classical sites for venous thrombosis is the hepatic vein, which is called Budd-Chiari syndrome, and the superior sagittal sinus thrombosis, okay, in the cerebrum. Last is the cytopenias. Cytopenias means there is deficient hematopoiesis, so it will affect all the cell lines. There would be anemia, neutropenia, thrombocytopenia, and also reticulocyte count would also be reduced. This is one type of hemolytic anemia where you have reduced reticulocyte count because the bone marrow is not producing enough cells. For diagnosis, hemolysis, how will you diagnose? You know by now. In CBC, there would be anemia and elevated retic count. So elevated retic count, normally it can occur, but whenever there is PNH, it is usually associated with aplastic anemia, and there would be reduced retic count also. Serum bilirubin, LDH would be increased, haptoglobin reduced, hemoglobinemia can occur. Urine, hemoglobinuria and urobilinogen also increased, bone marrow, erythroid hyperplasia normally. But in cases where there is aplastic reaction, there would be bone marrow, there would not be any cells in the bone marrow. Now, what is the specific diagnosis of PNH? First is the HAMS test, which is the acidified serum lysis test. So, what happens when there is low pH? On low pH, there is complement activation, and the PNH cells will lyse. But it cannot detect the varying degree of RBC sensitivity. It is just a screening test. It will just tell if there are PNH cells present or not. Next is flow cytometry, which is more sensitive test, and it allows detection of even minute percentage of these cells. So we use monoclonal antibodies to the missing proteins like CD55 and 59 and fluorescence of labeled cells to detect certain red population. In this, we can screen RBCs, WBCs, platelets. So this is what the cells will look like. Okay. So you have from here you are detecting CD59 levels. Okay. So this is the normal population which have this one, the type 1. This is the normal population which should have the increasing percentage of CD59. These are the type 3 cells which have only minuscule negligent percentage of CD59, and these ones are the type 2 cells which are intermediate between type 1 and type 3. So any patient can have either type 1, type 2, type 3, all the cells, or it can have only type 1 and type 3 cells. So varying permutation and combinations are there. Then you have Cefacryl microtyping gel card. It is a rapid test. In this, what we do, this is MIRL, CD59, DAF, CD55, and this is control. So you take a test and control simultaneously. Here, there are antibodies which are present against the MIRL and DAF. So if you're adding your blood sample in this one, okay. So if you're adding blood sample to this one, and this is the control, okay. And this was some other patient. If there is antigen present, if there is antigen antibody reaction which is taking place, that is, if the patient's blood has CD55 and 59, there will be antigen antibody formation, and this pellet will come down like this. Okay, so this is the control, this is how it should be. If the CD55 and 59 are absent, this will be here only. This red thing will be here only. Okay. So these are negative. That means CD55 and 59 are absent in this case. That means the patient is diagnosed with the case of PNH. Okay. So in clinical course, the patient can have a disease for a few years, up to 25 years. Death usually occurs because of thrombosis. It can lead to myelodysplastic syndrome or acute leukemia, and aplastic anemia is a known complication of such cases. Okay, I'm sorry I've taken a lot of time of you. If there are any questions, then you can ask. I'll just give you my email ID so that you can ask your questions.